Welcome back to the show, guys, and I'm really excited for you to get into this next episode with me. I first met Flex Lewis at a dinner through a mutual friend who's also been on this podcast in Las Vegas, and was immediately taken not only by the guy's size, because his bicep is actually bigger than my waist, but by how humble and magnetic this guy was. I came to learn through the course of this dinner and evening that this guy was the most accomplished athlete in his sport. He was a 7-time, and I mean 7 consecutive times, title holder as Mr. Olympia in bodybuilding. It was absolutely incredible to meet this guy and hear his story about resilience, overcoming the odds, and really silencing all of those critics back home that told him he's not going to amount to anything, that he won't win. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did shooting it, and let's get into it. This caliber, not to mention of this accent.
What accent?
You guys can hear this stuff. Hear it for yourself.
Yeah.
I want to first start with you on the obvious question. Mm-hmm. To do something once in life could be considered nice, great, maybe it was good timing, and some could even call it lucky. To do it twice means you have staying power. 3 times, okay, this is the real to it. But 7 times to be Mr. Olympia, there's a word for that comes to mind, which is legendary. That's what I think. How does someone continue the will and stay motivated to keep driving? What is the force that pursues 7 world titles?
Well, thank you for the great introduction. I appreciate the word legendary, but maybe in my mother's mind, I try to keep myself humble, as you know.
Yes.
But in terms of chasing the Olympia title, you know, it was a dream of mine. Once I committed myself to that chase at a very young age, I mean, the top of the tree is Mr. Olympia. So at 19 years old, going to my first bodybuilding show, then competing in my first bodybuilding show, and coming to the United States, the top of the tree, the Super Bowl, is Mr. Olympia. So I had to have my vision, as delusional as what it was, and chase that. And I had to have my whys. So every one of my Mr. Olympias, if we're just focusing on that chase, every year I had to recreate my why. The first year was winning it, right? Yes, I done it. All that hard work, all the dreaming, I done it. But then to call yourself a champion in my eyes, you got to defend that title. So the why was defending that title. The third year was the 50th year anniversary, a very iconic year. Joe Weider, who, you know, was the godfather of bodybuilding, to win that year with all the celebratory and history that was involved with that. That was my why. And again, 4th other why, 6th other why, 5th other why, 6th other why, and 7 other why. So each of them was special, but every single year, especially I would say from 4 to 7, I really had to home in on a why, because why I say that, I had a weight division to make. And that weight cap, I had outgrown that weight cap. So it was tremendously hard for me to make that weight every single year. And that weight was 212. So the second to the 212 class, and my body was saying, you don't like this number, and all you got to do is jump on the scale.
Sure.
And jump off the scale.
Even more difficult.
Absolutely.
And you say why, a different why each time.
Yeah.
Did that help renew, and did it feel, when you had a totally different, independent why of the previous one,
Absolutely.
a new one, make it feel like you were just starting from scratch?
Absolutely.
So it humbled you, like you trained like an underdog all over again.
Yeah.
Not like a champion.
Absolutely. And I also remember the same characteristics that won me my first show.
You had the formula.
Yes. It was, I kind of say this, but I have this poor man's mentality, and I think it's such a great drive. Even to this day, I still have this poor man's mentality. Like, my gosh, it could all end tomorrow. Thankfully, you know, I have these firewalls that won't happen, that, you know, that happen, but I still have it. I question it many times, and many times over. I had it for every one of my Olympia wins. As I said, I still have it to this day. It's a massive driving force, and that obviously comes from my humble upbringings. But I don't want to lose it. As much as I say, it can torment me, you know, in a good and a bad way. It's a massive driving force. That poor man's mentality, when you know that when you grow up, you didn't have what maybe others had. In the household I came from, just to preface this, my mum and dad were incredible. Very loving household. I'm very blessed to have my parents. But I also remember what it was like for me to ask for something and then my parents say, we don't have the money. We don't have the money. And soon enough, when you get old enough to kind of slightly understand, my parents don't have the money, then I have to earn the money. So that's how I got into my young entrepreneurial streak at a very young age. And that was, if you wanted to talk about it, was the finches. I went to a pet shop, bought a male and a female finch. You know, you can imagine what happens next. You've got a lot of finches. And that expanded into many more finches. And I went back to the pet shop and sold them off. And then this kind of rinse and repeat turned into parakeets, into parrots. So I kept on evolving the bar because of the monetary factor. And that entrepreneurial speak was nothing that I was taught. I just had this instinct to get in and hustle. Yeah, you know, and my dad or my mum or none of my family members were entrepreneurs or business owners. I just knew that for me to kind of get what I wanted, if I wanted to buy a bike, then I had to earn it through my paper rounds, through these endeavors.
Such as earned every day. Yeah. And then as that played forward into your competing days, what I hear you say, which I love, is that people should always, after they won, you should continue to train like an underdog. Form like a champion, because there's a certain way a champion knows how to win once he's done it. He has the formula, as you said. But the training is like an underdog. He doesn't rest on his laurels. He's not as good as his last victory. He started with a clean slate. Trains like an underdog. Like he wants it. Yes, he's hunting, right? But when he gets there, there's an element of, I've been here. I know what to do. I could stay within myself, and I'll execute. Train like a underdog, but perform and compete like a champion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's it.
I've also, as many people, seen that underdog be able to perform to achieve that goal of winning a championship, winning a title, winning a belt, whatever it is. And when they get there, they've tasted the meal and they get off the gas. And I don't understand that. You know, with fame and belts and championships or titles, that really should form you into more of a savage. When you get distractions when you're the champ, you get invited to do stuff, you get, you know, come to this club, we'll pay you to do this, we'll pay you to do that. But what is getting you up every single morning, let's just say MMA, to run 5 miles? Are you still doing that 5 miles now that you're the champion? Are you still doing the things that you are hungry to do every single day? And that's why I mentioned the poor man's mentality. I kept that sharp. I won the title. I had my one day of celebration. Guess what I was doing the next day? I was back doing cardio because I had another show to do. So I never celebrated any of my wins until my competition season was done. And that was normally Christmas time. So when I was ready to celebrate, everybody else was like, oh, well, you won that several months ago. Yeah. But that's when I allowed myself to kind of be like, okay, I've done it. I've achieved this season. I'm going to kind of enjoy my Christmas time and then back on the horse come January.
Right. And if you talk to me, you're taking me back to those days, the humble beginnings.
Yeah.
And some tough times. I know you were bullied a lot and called a lot of names, right? As a kid, like
never bullied.
Not bullied, sorry.
No.
Called names like you mentioned dyslexic, or like people would throw names out there and label you.
I was a bully's dream, by the way. Being a redhead, I made sure that never happened. And my brother's a redhead too. I made sure that my legacy that I left the school with, that my brother had too. Oh, that's Flex's brother. But anyway.
Coming from that, the dark place of being called names and then sometimes knowing that, you know, mom and dad can't always get these things for us and maybe it's going to be on me. Were there some moments that you still look back to, like your mind takes you back there to a moment at home or a moment on the schoolyard or somewhere that you continue to draw strength and remember, like when you're going through something difficult now that you said, I've been there.
Yeah.
I know. And this is where it came from. Is there one or two particular moments that you can go back to?
I have many. I can tell you a story if you like, where in one particular moment, I would say my majority of my school years, there was no such thing as dyslexia back then. For me, it was later discovered first week of college. So I went through 5 years of school, and which would be kind of the equivalent of high school, where the old school teachers that came from, I mentioned this on stage earlier, they came from the whip era. They were still there when I was in school. So even though the whip wasn't around, they still have a vicious tongue. So if you weren't listening or paying attention, you were labeled as stupid. You were labeled as whatever it could have been. But stupid was a word that was used for me. And I was either put to the back of the class or the front of the class. Now, I didn't turn up a class to misbehave. I just couldn't get what was going on. And once you don't get the basic 101 of maths, for example, on certain, equations, stuff that we don't use now in business, what I mean? I won't even go into it. But once you kind of get lost in the shuffle of not knowing the basics, then when it progresses on, then you're kind of just lost. This is all foreign language to you. And that's what I was labeled. Now, maths, for example, this teacher would always put me in these predicaments and kind of pull me out of the class and talk as if I had no chance of surviving. I remember a particular story where she said to me, you're going to go one of two directions. You're either going to go into the military, and that's where you'll find yourself, or you're going to be in jail. I'm like, when you're a young kid, you hear that, and you come from a small town anyway, and you don't really see so much success, you kind of start putting yourself in that box. And you start, on some occasions, it's like, wow, is that my future? When I knew it wasn't. And I fought that so hard. So much so, when I finished school, I went to college. They told me first week, it was like first 2 days there after doing the test, that you got dyslexia and ADHD. I was like, what the heck is that? And then they explained it to me. They gave me a laptop and they explained, like, this is going to be used in your lessons. And it was a massive bag off my back because I knew I wasn't stupid. I knew I wasn't one of any of these cliches or terms or names that these teachers used for me and many others in my classes and many other classes. I started my first business in college. I grew that business to a successful moving company. Fast forward 3 years, I won 3 Business Money Awards. I had 13 employees. I had trucks. I had fleets. And I was invited back to school. And I remember walking into the school to find this particular teacher. I walk in and my success story being talked about and everything else. And I was cock of the walk when I walked into the room. Same teacher. And I looked around and she was putting me on the, I knew this guy was going, this is an example for a small town guy doing his thing. And I said, can I ask you a question? Are you sitting here because she put you here? Yes. I was sitting in the exact same places as probably you and you in the back. And she called me stupid, probably like you called me, you've been called stupid. Am I correct? And you can imagine this teacher was like, yep, this person was a massive driving force and put me in a box. And now I'm in here to tell all you guys and girls in this class that through determination and hard work, forget the labels. You put what you want to into anything you do and you'll receive whatever you put into that, you get back.
How satisfying was that?
A beautiful moment. And one I don't mind sharing about.
Your face is lighting up as you say it, right? I can see you being back in the room.
It's crazy again, that young kid. I can still remember what it was like to kind of be put down and stamped on. PE, for example, I survived in there. I survived. I'm sorry. I excelled in PE. I played rugby. I run for my country. So the PE teachers poured into me, and a few other teachers poured into me too. And I was there, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. And if I didn't understand, I was prepared to fail to learn. With these other teachers, they didn't give us a chance. So for me to return back to school, many years later, and tell my story and also kind of remind the kids in that class that, listen, I'm nothing special. I'm just like you, from the small town. Dream big, have your big lofty goals, and just chase them. And don't let anybody tell you can't.
Yeah. And when we talk about success, and it's a beautiful story. That's an amazing story. I'm really happy you shared it with us. And hopefully people relate to that, having that moment. They can go back and avenge something in a way, emotionally.
Yes.
Or just say, I told you so.
Yeah.
I have more belief. But when we talk about success, in today's day and age, people want it easy. Mm-hmm. And I know in your competing days and in the gyms you run and the people you're around, the people maybe that come to you asking to be trained to reach some certain echelon, they want it easy, right? And they want it instantly. And it doesn't happen that way. You have a one day at a time mentality.
Yes.
Stack wins on top of each other. Talk to me about that.
Well, if you're looking at building a house, for example, everything starts at a foundation. Without foundation, it's nothing. So that mentality is that first brick down. One brick at a time, one day at a time, one rep at a time, one step at a time, whatever that is to you, make sure that is poured into whatever you want to achieve. And before you know it, and also there's so many life's cliches, right? The older I get, I'm like, oh, these cliches now sound so applicable to my life and everybody else's. But it's true, right? What you put in, you get out. And bodybuilding, suffice to say, was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I'd done a lot of high-level stuff at that period of time, played rugby, run for my country, box, gymnastics, all these different things. But bodybuilding was the hardest thing, down to the fact that the better you look, the worse you feel. And that is such a mind mess. It's just a mind, can I say fuck? Mind fuck, right? Yeah, it's a commitment to a goal, a task. The date is set, come hell or high water, you need to turn up on that date in the best version of you. And if you cheat when nobody's looking, if you miss cardio, if you miss a training session, it's all going to look that way on stage. So I can tell you eye to eye, I never missed a cardio session. I never ate more than I needed to. I never missed a training session. I never missed anything that was on my plan to get me to that point. And to answer your question, was the mentality to how I got there. It's just committing yourself to that end goal.
Right.
And at one brick at a time, right? So me getting into bodybuilding, I really done it for a free gym membership at first. I never knew that this was going to open up the world that it ended up being for me. But when I realized that this is something I love and I can actually get paid for and see a future in, I was all in. All cards were in.
Right. And with LFG Energy, we talk about it a lot, that you have to be putting in the work.
Yeah.
And you have to stack small wins. It's not this sprint, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's slow and steady. And we can't put a timeline on success. It could be short, a little bit shorter for some, much longer for others. And the one day at a time, the one brick at a time, laying the foundation mentality. It's so important for people to hear now, because it's lost on everyone. We see instant success, but nobody knows what actually goes into it. If I look at you, if I didn't know you, if I didn't know your story, I see this guy, he looks like he's winning at everything.
Mm-hmm.
He has a beautiful family, in those gymnasiums, he's got 7 world titles, he's training other athletes. So they say, oh, he's winning, it just comes to him.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be a grave insult to all the blood and the sweat and the dark moments, maybe even depression at times, being as low as a cricket's ass to the ground. Tell me about that, and maybe a place of where you came from, whether it was home or something specific that happened.
Yeah.
That will just remind everyone who's listening to this that stuff wasn't easy.
Yeah. Great question. I would say that what you mentioned earlier, that instant success is promoted so hard and heavily. The 3-minute abs, the quick this, quick that, or now it's the Instagram version of what everybody sees. And everybody only posts their highlights, right? I have no problem. And in fact, I talk more about my failures and the periods of me going through whatever it was to achieve success, because that is the reward, right? Had you not been on, rock bottom, you don't know what true success is. If you've had a fast path to success and you're sitting on top of the mountain and you've not gone through any hardship, that first moment that you get slapped in the face with some reality and some hardship, a lot of people don't know how to take that. They fold. They've just had such a fast pass and such a success, or such a easier ride, then they just crumble and fall. And the majority of times they can't come back from it. I am so grateful and so blessed that I went the road that I did, through the turmoil, through the hardship, the tears, the unseen this, the unseen that, but that forged me into the champion I am. And that's one of the reasons why I can talk on a mic and say this. I can speak to fans who are going through the same things, because I've been there. I've had no money. I've had no food. I've had no opportunity. But all these things I mentioned, I've got through it because I had self-belief that I was going to get through that. So in terms of being at the rock bottom, I've been there many times and I've got so many different stories. But I could say, let's just say on my Olympia wins then, right? One of them, number 6, was probably going to be my last one. And that was the year that one of my close friends passed away 3 weeks before the show. And devastated everybody around us. And I had to dig deep and truly recreate my why for that year. because it was, for me, it was tough for everybody around us. And then going to the Mr. Olympia, I had, you know, a 2-3 hour line that from front to back were crying. And I just had to stand there and just console every single fan, because they were just as devastated too for the loss of a person that everybody loved. And that year, again, I couldn't even tell you what happened. I was in this autopilot. And through tricks and tips and things of old, I was managed to get through that show. And after that, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, I was bawling, couldn't stop. You know, most people at that point in time have gone through the grief. But at that, I had to get through these shows, and then I allowed myself to grieve, and the funeral and everything else. It was all part of the Olympia thing. But after the Olympia and then everything was done and dusted, I allowed myself to grieve. I don't even know if I allowed myself to grieve, but it just...
There was nowhere else for it to hide. Right?
It was just like, you're dealing with this.
It sounds to me that you were very good at mastering the art of compartmentalization.
Yeah.
You were able to compartmentalize and lock something away. That's not something anybody can do.
Yeah.
Right? Most people would be just overwhelmed or overcome by what's happened, and it's going to bleed into every aspect of life because they're only human.
Yeah.
How it is for most humans.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is not the average soul capability to be able to do. How were you able to do that? Or do you even have any rhyme or reason for it? Or is it just part of your DNA?
I had a great support system that kind of padded me. I had a BBC documentary was following me, and it was very hard for me to be the athlete that had trained a whole year for this show and then be the friend that lost his little brother. And somewhere along the lines, I was in, I was out, I was in, I was out, and I don't want to sound like I was cold or heartless, because in this middle ground, it was a mess. But that's where my team came in, and they padded me. They allowed me to have my moments. They were like, listen, we're doing it for another reason. You're doing it for dollars now. And then, as I said, after the show, I went into this, I would say, depression, where I was like, I don't even know if I want to do this again. I don't know if I want to get back on that stage. It hurt me, hurt me losing somebody close to me. And I went to, now this was in Christmas time where I allowed myself to grieve. I went to a show in FIBO, which is the biggest fitness expo in the entire world, in April. I wouldn't say it was on autopilot, but I still wasn't all in on the Olympia because I didn't know if I was going to do it or not. And I turned up at this 4-day event and thousands of fans. And just to hear the fans excited for me to turn up at that Olympia that year, I said, I'm all in, and this is going to be my last. And this is going to be the best version that anybody's seen. And this is the year that I do it for the reasons that I came here to the United States, to end on a bang. So last year was for my friend. This year is for me. And I went all in, and I literally killed myself to make that weight. But I enjoyed every moment of it. And when I tell you, I said to myself, which I wasn't on many others, you have to be in the moment. So I can tell you, I remember putting my foot to the step of the Mr. Olympia stage and feeling how the cold stone turned to hot from the lights. Walking onto that stage, and then the unforgiving lights and the heat that's generated off the floor, and the audience, I got goosebumps thinking about it. Have to be in the moment. I remember telling myself, this is the last, enjoy it, and again, I'm a different flax on stage. I'm a charismatic, I'm confident, not cocky, but you walk that fine line on confidence, right? But I'm the champ, and you have to exude that. This is my stage. If you want to beat me, come and beat me on this spot right here, on the X. I remember looking into the audience and seeing people I knew, celebrities, the judges, and I just remember everything. For the previous 6, blur. Some marry into one another. Sure. Is it 6? Is it 2? Is it 3? But number 7, I can tell you, heart to heart, I knew and felt and smelt and breathed everything in that 7, because I knew it was going to be my last in that weight division, but I didn't know it was going to be my last ever. And I'm so glad I was conscious enough to understand and realize that be in the moment. And I appreciate to this day talking to you right now.
I can feel that.
Yeah.
And that's the appreciation that an athlete needs to have, but it also shows the utmost respect for your craft.
Thank you, mate.
And for the space that you compete in, which is why you're the great champion you are. You respect with so much humility, you respect the greats that have come before you, the sport itself, the art that it is, and this process that goes into it, and you take nothing for granted. That is just like beyond inspiring, what you shared there. And I think that's the word that comes out in that as you're sharing that story is pride.
Yeah.
And I heard you say today on stage that you are the American dream.
Yes.
I got a tear in my eye when you said it, because some people refer to it as like immigrant mentality or whatever, but like you take nothing for granted. Like it's pretty obvious. You can tell that in talking with you. How important is that? And not everyone can say that because maybe they don't have immigrant mentality. They are from this country. But to have like a real burning sense of purpose and something to fuel you, whether it's anger or whether it's resentment or revenge, whatever it might be, as long as you channel it the right way.
Yes.
How important is it? And how do people find it?